Hi, I'm Derek Fildebrandt, publisher of the Western Standard, and you're watching The Pipeline today on July 7th, 2021. Thank you for joining us. In the studio today is Western Standard news editor Dave Naylor, still not content with rubbing in England's cheating technical victory over Germany.
Derek, I'm very excited. We're an hour away from kickoff. As you know from our meeting today, we actually have hundreds of readers in England. So come on, lads, bring it home.
I was surprised by how many readers we had in England. It's pretty far from the West.
It is.
Yeah. And Corey Morgan, who doesn't bother himself with these pleasures of the vulgar crowd. How you doing, Corey?
Very good. I'm still vulgar, just a different crowd.
Yeah. Well put. Well, we've got a great show on the pipeline today. We've got the BC Civil Liberties Association's executive director and president saying, as it regards church burnings, burn it all down. Very interesting developments around that in British Columbia, as well as former, I don't know if he was chief of staff, but anyway, former top guy for Trudeau, Gerald Butts, says church burnings are understandable. He's okay with it. He's not saying, he's not going as far as the BC Civil Liberties Association saying you should do it. He's just saying it's understandable. It's okay to burn some churches. You got to burn some churches from time to time.
It happens.
Yeah. And British Columbia and Alberta reopening for the summer. Long overdue and good news. We're going to talk about that. We'll also talk about how funny it is that some people who think we're all going to die from having the Calgary Stampede are suddenly very excited to have some very big Stampede parties.
Yahoo!
Well, we want to begin the show by thanking our members for their generous support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com and get a membership. You can try it free for 15 days. I think it's money well spent. I don't know about you guys, but I think it's I think it's worth your time. I think it's worth your money. Supporting independent, bailout-free Western journalism, and that'll give you full access to all Western Standard content. We'd be very happy to have you. Today's show is brought to you by the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. No one works as hard for you as the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights to defend your ability to own and use firearms. Check out what the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights is doing for you by going to firearmsrights.ca and clicking Why Join Us. Today's show is also brought to you by Resistance Coffee. Go to resistancecoffee.com and use promo code Western Standard. That's one word, Western Standard, to get 10% off your first order. These guys are great. They're not the regular woke coffee crowd that take a portion of the proceeds and push it on to people trying to tell you what to do. These guys take a portion of their proceeds and they pass it on to organizations that are working to protect your constitutional freedoms. So check it out, resistancecoffee.com. Use promo code Western Standard to get 10% off that first order. Well, let's turn it towards British Columbia, the British Columbia Civil Liberties Association. It's a name of, sounds like it's something I would like. So who doesn't like civil liberties? I mean, we could use a lot more of them right now. Or at least we certainly could have in the last year and a half. But the president of the BC Civil Liberties Association says, burn it all down. Apparently, your liberties include the liberty to burn people's churches that you don't know. Dave, why don't you tell us about it?
Lots to talk about on this story, Derek. Firestorm began on the weekend when the head of the BC Civil Liberties Association, Harshan Walia, tweeted, burn them all down, in response to the Catholic Church fires that have been ravaging churches across Alberta and British Columbia. Seemed a strange thing to say, and the internet immediately blew up with anger, saying she should be reported to the police. I think that was about the nicest comment anybody said about her. It was followed on Monday. She has not spoken to the media, but she did speak to a Indigenous elder and told her it was the fault of a right-wing news organization. I guess that's us.
I think she's talking.
I think she's talking about us.
I thought we're left.
She says she was misquoted, even though her quote was "burn them all down," 4-word quote.
That's what we quoted. What was her actual quote?
We burned them all down.
That's what I thought.
Yeah, so hard to take.
Was there anything else she said in the context?
Not in that tweet. No.
So
No.
she said nothing before or after that.
Nothing public.
So we didn't pull that
No.
little word out. We didn't.
No, she tweeted it, claimed she was taken out of context.
Well, let's give it a little more context. Her tweet, "Burn it all down," was a retweet of a story about Catholic churches and Christian churches in general,
Yep.
mostly Catholic, but Christian churches being burned down. So that's some context.
Yep.
She tweets, "Burn it all down."
Burn them all down.
Yeah.
Hard to take out of context.
I'm failing to see how.
The next day, an Alberta Indigenous lawyer by the name of Naomi Sayers said she would help burn them all down. So, of course, that sparked even more outrage. Apparently, complaints have been made to the Law Society about her conduct. Ontario NDP member of their legislature came out in support. The president of the BC.
Sorry, an Ontario member of an NDP member of the Ontario legislature backed church burnings?
She did.
Do we have a story on that?
We do. It's up. WesternStandardOnline.com.
See how much I know.
Sometimes.
See how much I know. We produce a lot of content. I can't even keep on top of it all.
It's definitely worth your membership money. And today, the president of the BCCLA, basically Walia's boss, stood by her. Also said the quotes were taken out of context and not to be taken literally. But surely a social media firestorm, if you'll excuse the pun, across Canada about the urging of churches to be burnt down. The Indigenous reaction has been, no, don't. These churches are still in use on some First Nations land. They're historical buildings, more than a century old. The church in Morinville, outside Edmonton, and in the center of town, beautiful historic building, ruined by arsonists. So, 24 fires now across the west. One in the Northwest Territories, even in Yellowknife. So it's a spreading. I'll call it a disease. Police forces are setting up task forces to try and find the culprits, and I think it's a major problem there.
Corey, burn it all down. Out of context?
If there's no other context to read it in, it's just blunt as it gets. I mean, if she was going to backpedal and try and make excuses, she'd say, it was heated, I was emotional, I didn't mean it literally, I'm sorry about it. But she didn't. She hasn't apologized. She hasn't backed down. She just locked her social media account. And I mean, this is very serious. This is grossly irresponsible and dangerous. I mean, yeah, what 24 fires in churches so far? We're lucky a firefighter hasn't been killed yet, or a bystander, or somebody in one of those churches. We might get a church member. I wouldn't be surprised if there's a few churches where some people are sitting out in the night waiting to make sure they guard their church, and that could lead to a bad encounter. This trend has to come to a stop. And to have some clown like her, who has a degree of profile, to go out and say burn it all, and it really did. At least it was good smoking out the extremists in our country to see, like an MPP in Ontario coming out and a lawyer in Alberta to say they support this kind of anarchistic, dangerous crap. We can't put up with this. This is not acceptable. I mean, I'm a free speech person, but it's like the old saying of, a fire in a theater. When you're preaching doing harm to others, you've changed the whole...
Actually, it's worse than screaming fire in a theater. It's saying set fire to the theater, and people actually taking you up on it.
Just imagine if somebody had said string them up.
Yeah.
And rightly so, whoever said that, and there's very few contexts where that would be acceptable, they would be pilloried, they would be completely sidelined. And there has been good backlash against this case, though. I mean, most people, rational people, realize that was a completely irresponsible and gross statement. It's just too over the top.
What do you think, Corey? What do you think the chances are that, if police manage to catch any of these people, what do you think the chances are this would be considered a hate crime?
I don't know. That's for people with more legal knowledge than me to set that bar at, I guess. I mean, you are targeting a religious group, but then,
Yeah, it doesn't apply to Christians.
You know,
It doesn't apply when you burn down.
You know for
Christian
sure if it had
churches.
been synagogues or mosques, no, there would be no doubt this would be considered a hate crime. And this is definitely targeting, but whether it happens, I wouldn't.
I would point out the few people that have been arrested for knocking statues down have only been charged with mischief, which is slap on the wrist material.
The one thing I will
It's a
predict
step
is
above a parking ticket.
Basically,
if we catch some of these arsonists, I'll be quite surprised if any of them are actually First Nations people. I'll be more likely, I think, that we're going to find white middle-class social justice warriors who crawled into their parents' basements and decided to.
Well, in one of the churches, it wasn't being burned, but it was being vandalized with paint. They actually did get some video, and these people were wearing masks. But as far as we could tell, these were white Karens. These are white Karens doing this. Maybe I'm mistaken, but judging from my own two eyes, these people were as white as snow. And they're just creating violence on behalf of people that they're aggrieved for. What they're doing, though, is they're actually going to incite hatred and resentment towards First Nations people.
Yes, yeah.
And as well, one thing that gets lost here, there's a few exceptions like Bourneville, but the overwhelming majority of these churches are Indigenous churches. Indigenous people, Nathan Gita, our BC political columnist, host of the Nathan Gita of the Mountain Standard Time show. He's got a great column coming out today just on this. He's First Nations himself. Most headcounts show that Indigenous Canadians are more likely to be a practicing Christian than non-Indigenous Canadians. And these churches matter to very large numbers of people in these communities. And you are burning their churches. I mean, church burnings are wrong to begin with, but you should probably come and burn, I don't know, a white guy's church before you burn the Indigenous church, if this is what you're angry about. You're burning down the churches of Indigenous people on their behalf. And the overwhelming majority of Indigenous people do not seem to appreciate it. So it hurts their churches. They're the victims of it. But also the perception is going to be, even though it very much might not be the case, the perception is going to be that it's Indigenous people burning down non-Indigenous churches. And that doesn't appear to be the case.
It's just awful no matter how you look at it. There's nothing good coming out of this, nothing. And to see people try to justify it like that is just repugnant.
Yeah. Well, Justin Trudeau certainly didn't jump in front of the first microphone he could find when this started happening, but he eventually did condemn it, not in as strong a language as you would expect for others, other institutions being burned, but he did eventually condemn it. But his former top staffer, Gerald Butts, not so keen to condemn. What did Gerald Butts do?
He tweeted last night that while burning down churches, was not, quote, cool, he said it was, quote, understandable. I guess, and again, social media jumped all down his throat to the instant it was published. Is it understandable to burn down things? I don't know. Obviously, I'm not able to put myself in the position of those who are doing the burning down. As an outsider, I can't accept that it's understandable.
Corey, where do you stand? Church burnings understandable or not?
No, not in the slightest. It just goes without question to anybody rational and sane. And it's ironic that these guys call critics of them extremists and such. When you're putting out rhetoric like that, I'm just appalled. I mean, Butts, whatever he might be, isn't an idiot, but he certainly presented himself as one with this.
Can we just imagine if former top staffer to Stephen Harper said that burning mosques or synagogues was understandable? Can we just wrap our mind around that for a second? I think we have a pretty good idea. But Dave, what do you think would happen if Ian Brody, former chief of staff to Stephen Harper, he says burning mosques is understandable?
I think it would be the banner headline in the next day's Toronto Star, without a doubt. Again, this is just a perfect example of how the liberal mainstream media treats their own, Derek.
Yeah. Well, let's look at something almost as hot as church fires. So this damn summer has been pretty hot. Just in time for masks to stop being mandatory. We're reopening. Downtown Calgary is starting to feel a small sense of normality right now. Dave, tell us about the reopening plans, BC, Alberta. And actually, one of our readers says Saskatchewan's opening up on the 11th, so coming fairly soon.
Coming fairly soon. Well, everybody is now mask-free. City of Calgary this week, sort of the last holdout, dropped their mask bylaw finally. Town of Canmore, I believe, did the next day. So Alberta, BC, now masks-free. No restrictions in restaurants or pubs or outdoor gatherings. Funerals are back on, weddings are back on. So it's a great time to be alive.
Who would have thought we'd ever say funerals are better?
Yeah, and it's I know a few people who have suffered losses during the pandemic, and it wasn't pleasant that they were not able to hold proper ceremonies to say farewell to their loved ones.
Yeah, I was in that case as well, and
I think most people are.
Yeah, we people die, we lose people, and to not be able to honor them was a tough time. Corey, you wrote a great column on this, on unmasking Nenshi. Nenshi fought to keep mandatory masks till the bitter end, kicking and screaming. Tell us about how that council meeting went, and how the mask mandate was finally defeated, and who were the people who fought to the absolute bitter end to keep it, and who were the people who essentially just kind of folded at the end.
Yeah, well, it was interesting to. It was ugly political gamesmanship that was going on. Even going back to the first vote to keep those. I mean, we could see they were trying to put their finger in the eye of Premier Kenney. They do not like Premier Kenney. They do not want the summer reopening to be a success. They just don't want things to be happy. I mean, it's as simple as that. So they figured the way to do it was, we're going to maintain this law beyond what the rest of the province did. And they really did think, though, I think it fell apart for them when Edmonton, their council stood up and said, well, we're not doing that.
If Edmonton is being more, if Edmonton's council is being a bit more libertarian than Calgary's, it gives pause for concern.
And then Lethbridge followed, and then even Banff with Mayor Karen Sorensen, who was very outspoken to keeping the mask. So Nenshi was found himself standing alone. They kicked it down the road until the 5th. The city administration prior to that had been saying, we want to keep the mask bylaw until at least the end of July. Jody Gondek was positioning herself, mayoral hopeful, saying she wanted to see it well into August. Everybody was lining up on how they're going to be the hero saving Alberta. But a couple of others, they only needed to lose one vote, and a couple dropped off. So they were left standing with a lost mandate. But the predictable far left of council, because that's what it was Drew Farrell, Jody Gondek, Giancarlo Carra, and who was the last one? Shahal, a fourth one.
Who is that?
He's been, who that is. He's been trying the Dale Hodges approach to city council. Nobody moves, nobody gets hurt. If you hide in the background, you can make a 30-year career out of it. Mm-hmm. I've heard he might be looking to make a federal move coming up in a little while, which might be the first time for some reason we've seen him jump into this with this masking thing. There's a lot to read into these moves. Mm. And then Drew Farrell pulled a procedural stunt. I mean, because they decided they were going to get rid of the mask law, they needed 3 readings of it. But typically when it's been in council and the majority have said, okay, it's done, it's just going through the motions. You get unanimous consent, and the second one is done. But no, and she is a 20-year veteran of that council, said, no, I'm going to dig my heels in. I'm not voting. I'm not giving unanimous consent, which forced them to hold a special meeting in the afternoon just to do that and put it out. That's how stubborn, politicized, and stupid this got. But the bottom line is the mask bylaws are gone, aside from in city properties, on transit, and with provincial regulation in taxis, and unfortunately for me, in Uber.
But what it did was clear lines in the 2 front runners for the mayoralty candidate. Yeah. Jeremy Farkas fought hard against the mask. Jody Gondek fought hard for the mask. She was one of the four fabulous left who voted against the final
Drew a line in the sand.
the Drew motion. So you cannot get any more clear decision for the campaign.
Well, there we go. So if we're not all dead come October 18th, I guess Jeremy Farkas gets proven right.
Yeah, we'll see.
But if we're all dead, then I guess Gondek gets to be the mayor of Ghost Town.
Yeah, well, downtown's close to one these days anyways.
Yeah.
But we'll see what happens. I mean, nobody really wants to see infections go. But the numbers are great. And it's funny, though, again, watching some of that play, because you can see Mayor Nenshi was already backpedaling a bit on Friday and starting to pad his landing for Monday, saying, well, the numbers have continued to decline. We can reevaluate. We can look at things again. But Gondek just wouldn't back off.
And they played the, think of the children card. Ah. And one of their big arguments was, well, children haven't been vaccinated.
Children aren't dying from COVID. Oh.
Yeah, and that's the point. There's no stats out there showing that, the children are transmitting or even dying from the disease in large numbers. So,
yeah.
That was their final card they had, and it failed.
Well, let's talk about some of these holdouts. At least hold out until there's a good time to be had. Alberta Premier, former Premier and current NDP leader Rachel Notley. She has been pretty successful in getting Kenny to do what she wants for most of the pandemic. She says, crack down harder. Kenny says, no, you're locked down happy. Then a week or two later, he does it. That's been most of the case. But I think Kenny has now finally said, okay, a year and a half of this is enough. We're done. I think he's been essentially forced into it politically, but regardless of how we got here, we're in a good spot. Rachel Notley says, no, everyone's going to die. Can't reopen. We need to keep locking down. Should not be the best summer ever. That was until it got official. Masks are gone, lockdowns are gone, it's done. Stampede's going forward. Notley says Stampede should not happen. At least until recently, she's changed her mind. Dave, tell us about this change of heart of Rachel Notley.
Giddy up, Derek. She did change her mind and is going to have a big Stampede bash this Thursday at Prairie Winds Park, 5 o'clock. Bring your own blanket. She's been fighting against the Stampede since May. At the end of May, Notley and Kenny had a terse exchange in the legislature. She brought up the fact, other Canadian exhibitions like the CNE and the PNE and the Formula One race in Montreal were all canceled, and questioned whether or not Kenny was pandering to the Stampede and setting the July 1st date just so the Stampede could go ahead. Kenny responded saying, well, if it was up to Notley, the NDP would be locked down the entire summer. So many people are calling her a hypocrite. The NDP advertised this big party yesterday. We did a story on it, which Kenny took great joy in mocking Notley with it, saying basically, welcome to the party, Rachel. I hope you have a good time. It does seem a complete political about-face.
Corey, flip-flopping hypocritical politicians is not a particularly new thing, on left or right. Mm-hmm. How do you think Notley squares this one? This is supposed to be a super spreader death match, and now she's having her own big party. How many events is Notley slated to attend?
They said they're going to have a fun-filled Stampede week.
I think I saw something like 11 events she's officially attending or something. Politicians are always at Stampede, but it might be a super spreader event, but when there's votes to be had, she's here. How do you think she's going to square this politically? How does she answer this? I
don't know. It was interesting. I play on Twitter, and I looked at her tweet with it, and of course I took part in mocking her as well, because I love mocking hypocrites, right, left, center, doesn't matter. Hypocrisy, you guys earn it. And she got ratioed, which means, very few people actually liked her tweet, but a lot of people were just cutting into her. I would say the majority cutting into her were coming from the left, not the right. Her own supporters are pretty upset about this.
Really?
They took, a stand on this. They supported her. They pushed. They said the Stampede's irresponsible. And now suddenly, whoa, now I'm looking the fool. Rachel, you're leaving me hanging me here. In the long run, how much it costs, I don't know. But hypocrisy, as we know, does cut. And politicians can't pass up in the Stampede. She painted herself in a corner because, I guess taking that stance, she was kind of hoping that it wouldn't happen. But you can't miss out on that 2 weeks of ass kissing and pancake flipping. It's important. That's why we see the Prime Minister come out for this. If there's any chance you're going to see a Prime Minister in Alberta sitting one, it's during Stampede, or any of the other major political figures, it's during the Stampede. So she couldn't lose that opportunity. I think she gambled on, being exposed as a hypocrite, and you are, is still better than missing out on the 2 week opportunity of some face-to-face campaigning on the ground in a city that's probably going to be a swing one in the next election.
Yeah. I'm a bit more cynical, but I don't think hypocrisy tends to hurt politicians most of the time. That's why they do it.
Yeah.
If there was a bigger price to be paid, they would be less hypocritical. Consistency, people say they like consistency, but consistency actually doesn't generally lead to a particularly good political outcome most of the time. So I think she'll get away with this.
Yeah. If it was an election, she's facing one this fall, this might hurt, but this will be long forgotten by the time they go to the polls. But it's still, she does look foolish out of it, and I'm going to make sure and others just to rub her nose into it. I remember tweeting about that weeks ago when the Stampede battle was going on. I was saying I want to see all these people who are saying the Stampede is irresponsible. Let's see how many of these politicians are actually at the Stampede when the time comes.
Yeah.
We're already seeing they're all going to be there. They're not going to miss out on this.
Yeah, I think so. Okay, well, that's it for today's show. Again, we want to thank all of our Western Standard members for their continued support. If you're not yet a member of the Western Standard, go to westernstandardonline.com/membership. Get a free 15-day trial, bailout-free Western independent media. See if you like it for 15 days. If you don't, please don't cancel, but you can. And but if you like it, keep on going. We'd be very grateful for your support. As well, today's show is sponsored by Resistance Coffee. Go to resistancecoffee.com. Use promotion code Western Standard, one word, to get 10% off your first order. They're a great company. At least according to Corey, they taste good. I don't know. He likes to taste the Liberal tears. That's your favorite brand?
I do, yes. Maybe it's just the title that adds to it, but it's good coffee. So as I said, I didn't have to sit there and force a smile on to endorse this. It's good stuff. You won't be disappointed with your order.
Good. And one I can definitely endorse, personal experience, would be our other sponsor today, the Canadian Coalition for Firearms Rights. They work very hard to support your right to own and use firearms. Go to firearmsrights.ca and click Why Join Us to learn more about them. I'd strongly encourage that you become a member, gun owner or not. It's an important right that needs to be defended. And this is one of the most important organizations in Canada doing that. They work very hard for your rights. So please go give them your support and tell them the Western Standard sent you. That's it for today. Thank you very much all for your time. God bless and enjoy Stampede.
Go England.